Yeah, I
Oh,
can
all
see that.
And we're live.
Hey,
right.
Paul.
Yes. I know, Art. How are you?
Good. Groovy.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Nothing Media. We have Paul Hedderman this morning giving his talk.
Morning, everyone.
Yep, much ado about nothing. So, Paul, if you would like to take it away, it's all you.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everyone. I completely forgot, which is probably a good indication of the present tense. Yes. Unfortunately, for organizations, it may not be one of the best qualities, but here you are. So I don't know. Anyone have any question? Art, I think you're going to read them or something.
I'll read questions. Sure, certainly.
If you
As they
have any.
arrive. Somebody asked who is the one doing the waiting because the meeting was starting late. So
Yeah. Well, that's for you to know and to find out. Yeah.
very good.
Yeah.
No other questions so far?
Oh, good, good. That's a very nice state also. The state of no questions. Yes.
How's Paul feeling today?
Paul's doing well. I have some visitors in the house. I sort of spaced out that I had something to do this morning. Yeah, we have some people from the East Coast doing something in the living room right now. Yeah, I'm fine. Just woke up feeling well. It's a beautiful, quiet day out here. The cat is asking for my attention. And yeah, the idea of let's just break it down simply for if anyone comes in. Just non-duality. I just like to take it simply as a negation or a basis of how life gets interpreted here, which is a dualistic mechanism rooted in the idea of subject-object. And non-duality is just proclaiming it's not that. Yeah. So it says not two. Non means not. Duality means two. So it's not heralding oneness. It's just basically negating the idea of two-ness, because a lot of the dilemmas isn't really about hearing the message, it's how the message is heard. So the message can be heard from the dualistic basis, where you and I believe Paul went to the meeting and Paul heard the message that there isn't a Paul, let's say. Now, Paul, there was a feeling of something when the message was heard, because it really was never the message has never been heard by Paul. It's been claimed by a mental state implying it was Paul. So the message gets heard. There's a feeling of something which intrigues, let's say, the action figure. But they go home, they leave that meeting, and now there's a story that Paul went to this meeting and Paul heard some incredible, interesting ideas that there may be no need to search or to seek or to try to get, because Paul is already what he is looking for. Well, that's not true in a way. It's not Paul is already what you're looking for. It's what's looking is already what you're looking for. Yeah, it's already and always will be. So this idea of Paul is the stubborn, everything getting calibrated from this dualistic idea. Paul is the one who's sensed as the doer. When doing occurs, Paul is the feeling or the sense of being the seer when seeing is claimed. Paul is sort of like the emblem of being the feeler when feelings are felt. And there's this, so basically life has been interpreted as happening to me. This is what I feel non-duality negates. It doesn't negate life or the activities or thoughts or feelings or attachments or anything like that. It negates the one. It negates this idea of Paul, and that's exactly what it is. It comes after the act of claiming what's happening. So there's no one who's claiming what's happening. There's claiming what's happening to imply a one. So there's no one that's claiming what's happening. There's claiming of what's happening to imply a one. This is what happens. So the idea of getting out of thoughts is a thought. Yeah. So it's very persistent and stubborn. And so you can have a peak experience or an epiphany or some event can occur where that will be suspended. The production of self, let's say, or this idea of selfing will be suspended for a sufficient amount of time in time that a big hole is seen. There's something that's seen at that moment. And it usually gets covered up very quickly by the mental state arising and saying, I'm the one who had the epiphany. So usually epiphanies seem to end and become a past event when these thoughts arise. I'm having an epiphany. Why is that? Why is it that the party you heard is supposed to be so great when you arrive there, it sucks? Why? So there's this activity of subject object. So Paul feels like it's something that's thought about all day, and Paul thinks it's the thinking. It's the thinker. Yeah. So Paul believes it's the subject 1 minute, and then there's the sense of being the object another minute. This is not true. That's all. Yeah. It's an activity that's happening. And for the truth to be obvious doesn't mean that activity has to stop. What needs never to start in a way, because it never does, is the sense of being the one. It's just manufactured. So you live with that sense being manufactured, yet you're not that one. That's implied. Sort of being awake. Point of the talks, in my view, are to warn us about how the system reinvents itself, how the system morphs everything into it, how that frame frames every picture. Yeah. A spiritual picture, a fucking picture of doing the dishes. It doesn't matter. There's a claiming that's going to imply you. And usually the activity that does that is not noticed. And you start at that you that was manufactured. And now you, let's say, may want to get into non-duality because you want to get out of you. Really. I mean, most people's interest in topics aren't to get into the topic, it's to get out of something else in a way. So this is what we do regularly. That's probably why I didn't remember this. It's once a month, but I get into a habit of sharing talks on Zoom. So I usually show up on time, and or I have. And we just have that space to entertain these possibilities and to try to do to the best of not my ability, but hopefully what's happening now, answer them so that people may become clearer about what's happening now. Yeah. Things that we don't notice that produce an effect or start or create a starting point, not create, but make a starting point in our day. So we start at an imaginary square, and then we read the game board from that square. Yeah. So, yeah, if you have any questions, I'm here. And yeah, welcome. And I'm sorry for the delay of the start of the meeting. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we have some questions on Facebook, YouTube, and in Zoom. And if anybody in the Zoom chat would like to ask a question on camera, feel free to raise your hand. Bonnie Leibowitz asks, can you ask Paul to speak to behaviors and habits falling away as the message gets heard and the action figure's story is seen through?
Well, I don't need to say anything. If you're going through that, then you're observing it. Yeah. Yeah.
All
A
right.
lot of times there's some commonalities. People tend to have a defined sense of themselves by the interests and attentions where that lies. And then the interest and attention changes. You lose interest in shit that you thought you were like. You lose interest in reading and you thought you were a reader and stuff like that. So things change. And it doesn't mean there's a loss of interest. The interest is just getting brought out of certain things and it's going to be redistributed other places. Hopefully with the point of enriching your moment instead of enslaving it with an identification as a past historical Paul and a future historical Paul. Yeah. So that's just part of the, let's say, how the message turns in time in a person. Yeah. Or in the seeming person. So yeah, their interests, attentions, behaviors change. They've never been yours anyway. You just observe it, and there's a reflection on it, and hopefully it verifies the message you've heard. Yeah.
Excellent.
I mean,
So,
to me, yeah.
Are you ready for the next question, Paul?
Yeah, sure.
So from Facebook, Alexandru Safta asks, does the need to be perceived in a way drop once you apparently awaken, such as the need to look tough, secure, confident, or seductive?
Well, it may or it may not. It's not necessary. It's just not you. Yeah. It doesn't couple to that link of being you. So suave doesn't mean you're suave. Yeah. Tough doesn't mean you're tough. So it may and may not. It's not essential. Yeah.
Yeah.
The loss of interest is rooted in the loss of interest in the one, so to speak. So when the one wants to lose interest in a one, it thinks it has a lot to do with it's got to not be tough or not suave. That's to me humbly misdirected. Yeah. It's sort of like if there was a row of knots in a rope, yeah, and each knot had a topic, let's say relationship or being tough or something, and they're knotted, and you're feeling like they're not working for you, so you work at or you open to that knot to be undone. So maybe you do something, you read a book and you go to a seminar and it sort of helps, and then maybe a month later it's knotted up again. But this idea is we're trying to see what is the first knot that lends a single thread through all the other knots. And all the other knots have one constant ingredient. You are seemingly involved in them. So let's look at the you. Yeah. So instead of going through 50 knots of conditions and circumstances and behavioral attitudes, we'll just see who's the one who has them or doesn't have them. And maybe there'll be a loss of interest and a lot of stuff changing. It's like a bingo, Once you have when you hit a true touchstone, it tells you a lot. Yeah. So let's say, the problem from the solution, and the problem isn't being tough. That could be temporary thing about relationships or shit like that. The problem is the identification of being the one who's tough or the one who's not tough. That's the constant in all the all the possibilities, have an ego, losing an ego. What's that feeling that promotes this sense of having an ego? That's the sense of self. And what's that sense that's there when you don't have an ego? The sense of self. So is the ego the problem, or whatever you call the ego? Of course not. It's the ownership of it. It's the one who thinks they have one or hopes to lose one. That one, that one is constantly traveling into all the different topics and everything. I don't care about all that topics. I'm caring about that the mechanical focusing on an imaginary point, that happens all day through the claiming of what's happening called life, because there's a whole lot of focusing by the claiming of everything going on an imaginary point, this historical idea of being Paul, and I was Paul, I'm gonna be Paul, therefore I am Paul. I just don't, my interest in value has been severely focused. I found this sense of identification has a huge effect in the way life is seen. And so when that became obvious, I lost interest in a lot of the trees when I saw the forest in them all. And certain trees, they need to be cut down. Maybe they're blocking your view, and you'll have the wisdom to recognize that intuition. You'll be led to possibilities to allow things to open up more here, let's say. But you're not the one that's going to be causing it or directing that project. You're just the seeing of it. So it's not against anything else. I'm just sharing how it is right now in this surprise talk of how I'm seeing it, or how seeing it is translating through Paul. So I feel, if you want to know, I think there's an activity in time, I call it selfing, which it basically is part and parcel of the mental processes. And there's an intention or a movement in there. There's nothing that's having that movement. It can't be locatable, but there's a movement of when it becomes aware of something, or it's brought into contact with anything, there's a claiming of that thing to imply something, to imply there's a you or a doer. So you can see it. When there's an action through you, there's a feeling or a sense that you're the actor. Now, the action has happened or is happening, but that feeling of being the actor is sort of like an add-on. Now, that add-on isn't usually noticed. It usually feels like it's just a complete verified fact that when there's an action, there's an actor. When there's a feeling, there's a feeler, for sure. Because you feel, there's a feeling, and then there's something that notices the feeling, and you believe that's something that notices the feeling is a something, which it isn't. And so this is what happens. The mental state reinforces that idea, that mistaken interpretation, and provides an interpretation of life. Now, some people feel very saddled over time with that. They don't feel, it's like being a marathon runner in a closet. They seem never to be able to get out. They're always running around the track, but they never seem to really become like free range. And that leads them to running into other possibilities that sort of may describe what's going on. And maybe one of them will land, and maybe it will be non-duality. And the landing of that is the assumption is you are what you are now. It hasn't been named. It doesn't need to be named. It doesn't need to be reinforced. It doesn't need anything. It is. Yeah. And with that assumption, which is part of the invitation, the basic requirement in a way is the idea that possibly, just possibly, you actually are what you're looking for, but not as the you that's looking for it, but as the looking, the seeing. Yeah. Yeah. The seeker is really the sought. If that assumption has landed, then non-duality is I'd sit on that seat for a while and see what gets revealed. Because basically, most other invitations are based on another premise completely. They're based on the premise of maybe you are what you're looking for, but there's a huge amount of stuff required for you to become aware of that. Usually you've got to do some purification maybe in the body or whatever, a lot of practices, vigilance, concentration. And there you go. Whatever's dreaming is going to dream itself out of the dreaming the way it does. Maybe that's not where you've landed now. You've landed in really a message that's very disarming. It's not a call to arms. It disarms you in a way because you see the futility of using what you are to find what you are. You just saw it. Yeah. I mean, it's just freaking obvious that you can't use the Buddha to seek the Buddha. Now, as long as I'm believing I'm Paul, it makes me a lot of sense to use Buddhism to try to, cultivate the attributes that I thought the Buddha may have represented. It makes complete sense. And I'm not here to fuck with that at all. But if you've seen, hey, wait a minute, I'm not Paul, and therefore it makes complete sense to the Buddha that why would I use myself to find myself? Yeah, there's it would seem that it would be almost a disservice to the being to be looking for it or using it to look for itself, I feel. So yeah, and this isn't a draft. It's just something, if it works, if it fits, if the shoe fits, stay around that shoe store for a while, try some new models and see which one's best suited for you. Yeah. So, but if you believe that, Paul is going to be the Paul that's going to be there to exceed, even to experience its own absence as Paul, then just do what you feel Paul needs to do. Like people ask me a lot, hey, I feel like I really need to meditate. Well, then you better. If you really feel like you need to meditate, you better meditate. I don't feel like I need to meditate, so I don't. Yeah. I like to lay down. That's what I was doing right at the start of the meeting, but I don't call it anything. But there's nothing better or worse. It's just, but it's weird if you go to the shoe store and it works and you try to use, let's say, the non-dualistic slipper as a running shoe, it's not going to work really as a running shoe. It doesn't have enough tread. So it's very, very light. It's almost as if you're not wearing anything. So that's all.
Great. So thank you, Paul. So we have about 5 or 6 questions lined up from YouTube already. I want to ask you one of these, and then Alango has his hand raised. So then Alango will want to ask you something. Alongo. So somebody from YouTube with the username Chat Noir asks, it's not so much about getting rid of self, but rather ignoring selfing. Is that right, Paul?
Well, yes, but it's not an ignoring of it. And there's no one who's ignoring it. There's a loss of interest in it. Yeah. So ignoring seems almost as if there's an effort. It's a loss of interest by the messages of non-duality landing. Yeah. Because hopefully the message weakens that bridge where attention and interest is driven over all day, that it's about you. Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of like let's see, you're at night, yes, and the moths are driving you crazy, and you're trying to swat them away and shit like that. But if you would just take the light bulb out, they would disperse, yes. So ignoring would still being like the light bulb, and then trying to run the moths away.
Right.
Yeah. Losing of interest would be the light bulb dims or gets taken out, then the moths disperse. Yeah.
Right.
It's a different feeling. Yeah.
Makes sense. Excellent. All right. So Elongo has his hand raised. Go ahead, Elongo. You can ask your question.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Art. And I'm audible, Paul?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Paul, I'm from India. I've been a seeker for the last 30 years. Basically, my profession is I'm a doctor. And I've been following your talks for about more than 10 years. And I understand the self and the selfing. But I have a couple of questions to clarify the teaching. Do you accept the terminology called as enlightenment in spirituality?
Can you say that again?
Do you accept the terminology called as enlightenment or liberation for a human being on a spiritual journey?
No.
Okay, then there was an event which happened to you decades ago, which turned your life.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you call that as?
Well, the thing is, it didn't, but it wasn't for Paul. Paul didn't have the enlightenment.
Okay. But that event happened.
Let's say something happens, and then it gets broadcast through Paul, and then Paul has a story that he had a lot to do with it. But Paul, to me, this idea of Paul is an observation and a reflection, basically. Yeah. So when something occurs or something shifts, it had nothing to do with Paul. Paul was like a chair on the ground. The ground shifted, and then the chair with self-centeredness says, "Oh, I moved." Yeah, but it didn't move. The ground moved. Yeah.
So who am I talking to? Okay, who am I talking to now? Am I talking to Paul or am I talking to something else?
I don't know. I don't know that's something else. So in this little dance, you call me Paul and I call you you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No, you told, I mean, in your life, something happened. And similarly, a lot of people like who have got enlightened or liberated, they give a name to that. You may not give a name. You said nothing happened to Paul, but something shifted.
Yes. See, I don't believe, I'm more in the camp of Ramana, which says you don't realize something that's always realized. Yeah.
So what shifted for Paul at that time? What shifted at that time?
I have no idea. I've had a number of those. Well, you could see a lot of ones that would appear under the radar, but there has been some historical moments that the ground shifted and possibilities that weren't seemingly available became available. Yeah. Who knows?
But what was this shift? What was this shifting so that we can understand better, so that we can try to sort of assimilate what happened?
It was a change of well, I would say it was a very strong change in distribution of interest and attention, for one. Yeah. And also the movement of faith, not of faith as a force of mind. Yes. I didn't know that Paul, this experience of Paul had the ability to be convinced of certain things, but I observed that Paul seemed to be able to express that ability of being convinced. So I was convinced. Well, Yeah. I can't really, I'll use one historical thing. My life had been dominated by addiction, drug addiction, and really truly a desire to want to get out of something since I was quite young. But that desire to get out of something, a misdirected desire, manifested as addiction. Paul trying to get out of Paul through drugs and shit. And then that was like that was the chunky chapters of the story of Paul. That was a big chunk of the middle of the book, so to speak. And then one day, as Paul kept on keeping on, having no money, a real bad attitude, just wanting to get out of how I felt, I was willing to pay any consequences tomorrow not to feel how I felt today. And how I felt today was a total interpretation of the mental state, which I was not aware of. I took myself to be the product of the mental state, really. And then it was just a regular day at the office and something occurred and I was struck sober. Never, at least now, it'll be actually in 2 days, it'll be 33 years. I got struck sober and I haven't drank or used for 33 years. So in hindsight, I was convinced of something. It not in the head, not where Paul resides or where Paul seems to come from, but in the, let's call it the innermost or something. And it was a very clear depiction that day. It was like a CNN news flash. CNN is like a cable news station in America. It's like a CNN news flash, just a headline, and pardon my English, but it's applicable. I'm fucked, yeah. And then underneath it was a little something which is, and I'm not managerial quality. So the system of Paul had a rude awakening that the system of Paul was a failed system and could not be relied upon. So that shook up a lot of stuff. And thank God, or it would have just disappeared in a couple of days. I was introduced to a way of life called recovery that night. And I've been, the action figure Paul has been really changed and given a new way of living a day at a time that doesn't bring a lot of police into the situation and pain and suffering and sorrow of myself and others. So yes, and then that offered me a lot of possibilities. And one of those possibilities came later, which is being available enough to be looking into new ideas and then being introduced to the idea of non-duality. So when I heard that message, and I read a couple of books and went to a couple of satsangs, there was an unspoken yes. I don't know what to say. The shoes that were being offered had fit for a long time. It was actually quite nice to put them on finally. And it just became very clear what's going on those levels. And so basically, there you go. But the funny thing is, when people talk about big events, I would feel, I don't know what it was like with other people, others, but usually when things occur that way, it tells you that it's always been that way. So how can you continue the story that it happened when when it seemingly does happen in time, it tells you it's always been that way. It just seems sort of the system that wants to proclaim an event has been negated by the event itself it wanted to proclaim. So the event says, yeah, this is the way it is, and it's always this way, and it's never not been this way, and there you go. And then get used to a lot of things coming and going and peering this way and that way and shit like that, and the influence of time. Yet you're not of any of that. Yeah, so it allows you to travel lighter as Paul instead of traveling very heavy as Paul. Because if Paul is traveling as Paul, it's going to be fucking heavy. If there's no Paul traveling as Paul, it travels lighter. Yeah. So there you go. I hope that helped.
Yeah, that's very nice. And I have been having this doubt not only about you but about different teachers of non-duality. When you keep on referring to the I and Paul, it looks like there are two compartments to you, like a computer. There is a C drive and a D drive. Is it that Paul is different and the I speaking to me is different?
Well, you know, from having this seat assignment, you know, I've observed over the years that something comes through that isn't determined by Paul. You know, it's not from Paul. You could say it in one way, it's through what you would call Paul. And in a weird way, never the two shall meet. So, but yeah, I hope when the people come to talks, they don't leave thinking they got something from Paul. I wouldn't want you to get much from Paul, really. I hope you got something from nothing, so to speak. And that's the whole point. That's been my experience with this seat assignment. Something comes through. And so basically today, the body didn't show up. I had forgot about this meeting. So Harry, thank him, called me. And so the body got up and sat down. And then basically the body's done its job. And then something attends this meeting. Yeah. And then the meeting will end. And then the body will get up and have a coffee, hopefully. Hopefully the people who are staying here haven't stolen the silverware and shit. I'll do that. And then at 10:30, I have another meeting of recovery. And then Paul will sit down and then something comes through. Yes. Now, I don't see Paul as me. And I don't need to see from Paul that the other is me. I just see that Paul, this idea of Paul isn't me. That's all. I don't see anything else. I'm just a seeing. Yeah. So I'm not knowing the being. Yeah. I'm just, just here. That's all.
Is it that the being is?
I don't think
Yeah.
what's witnessing, people talk about witnessing. What witnessing doesn't need a witness. Yeah. It doesn't need a proclamation. There's a witness. There's just what's happening. Yeah. And there's awareness of it. Yeah.
Okay. Can I clarify that? Is it that there is a beingness which is speaking through the character of Paul using the body?
Yes, I hope so. I mean, again, I wouldn't take many suggestions from Paul. On some topics I would, but I wouldn't take any suggestions from Paul about the realm of non-Paul. Paul isn't authorized to be a travel guide to what's here now. It always adds time and inches to everything. Yeah, so
just to clarify again, so
Yeah.
what I am seeing through you is that I am hearing the eternal speak through me. Another word, maybe it's a bit grandiose. The cosmos speaking, the teacher speaking, the infinite speaking through the body mind of Paul.
yeah, yes.
So
Because
before, yeah.
this thing here, a lot of times, because of how we target things, we see things. Interest and attention is usually directed by the mental state to things. So obviously most people believe the messenger must have a lot to do with the message, and I'm not in that camp. Yeah.
Okay. Now, when the event happened to you, which you don't call as enlightenment, what is the difference which is happening now that there is a beingness coming through Paul, and earlier the beingness was not there? Can I say that?
It's just an awareness of that. Yes.
So the beingness
My
was actually
awareness was sort of,
only Paul was there. The beingness was sort of in a dormant state, not activated.
well, it was just not. There wasn't attention and interest wasn't directed there. Yeah, it wasn't even. It was constantly being directed away from that. So basically, in a way, that's the shift. Now the interest and attention sort of rests, and that to me is what people call presence. I believe presence is undirected interest and attention. So now there's a large amount of undirected interest and attention that is the fuel of being awake to being awake. Yeah. It's not distracted and in being sent hither and thither all fucking day. Yeah. So that to me is the feeling.
So can I say that I'm
in
listening.
a way, like you never get gypped, you see, because the mental state believes it's not in a moment. It believes this, it believes that. When that gets seen through, you're always here, completely. You're just completely here. So there's a stabilized acknowledgement of that wasn't produced or procured or achieved, but it's definitely noticed. Yeah.
Can we say, Paul, like, like, for example, there is a big country and there was a small chieftain ruling the country called Paul. Now the emperor has come back and Paul is pushed to the sidelines. The emperor rules. Once in a way, Paul comes and uses it's the other way around. Presence has anchored itself. Presence has anchored itself. The emperor has arrived.
Yes, it's sort of like that. Yes. But see, the emperor, when you think it arrived, it tells you it's always been here. So the idea of Paul was never as big as it was thought of. It's sort of like in these Zooms. Right now, there's a Zoom for some weird reason. I'm on it, and then there's a little box of me. So let's go to a Zoom. So let's say the whole screen was you, and maybe there was a little box of other possibilities. Now there's just a little box of you, and then there's a you empty space with lots of possibilities. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. It's that kind of turnaround. Yeah.
Well, excellent. Well,
and I don't know how you could do something. I don't know how you could do something to trigger that, because it's always available at all times. And I think a lot of the attempts to do it actually is a way of denying that it's always available at all times. So it's a tricky little conundrum, so to speak. Yes. See, if I felt I needed to do meditation, I would probably do it. See, this is about the real liberation is from the need to be liberated. Yeah. In other words, the condition that's available isn't made available by me doing a lot of shit. It's just available. Yeah. I mean, there's not like a negotiating with Paul. All right, Paul, you got to do this and this and this to make it available. No, it's available right where I am at all times with no requirement necessary. That's different than how it was held in the past. The past was I'm going to have to do a whole lot or undo a whole lot to finally be able to receive or whatever, or arrive at some conceptual idea, which was, in my own observation, was totally bogus, completely insane, to tell you the truth. Yeah. Now, if you want to be a spiritual person, I don't believe non-duality is a good vehicle for that. Yeah. Now, if you want to be, I think it's beautiful. Yeah, because you're going to appear a lot of ways, but the being is exactly what is always being. And I believe non-duality is a beautiful presentation of that. But if you want to be a spiritual person, if you want to demonstrate the effects of something, then, do hyper ventilating, Kundalini yoga and shit like that. You can get super, your skin can become translucent and you'll have beautiful, clear eyes and a loving gaze and shit like that. And maybe you can even levitate, but what the hell, I'd much rather just be chilled out, chilled out, be okay, so to speak. Yeah.
Well, Paul.
Yeah.
So I want to thank Alongo for his questions. We have to move on, Alongo. There's about 8 or 9 questions that are building up here.
We can go a little later. I can go till like 10:20. Then I have to get ready for another Zoom. So
okay, very good. Well, we'll have time later, Alongo. Yeah. So there's a question from YouTube from Lily.
Nice to see you, Alongo, though. Yeah.
Thank you, Alongo. So Lily from YouTube asks, is there a direct correlation between truly hearing the message and morality, less violence, and etc.?
In my own experience, I saw a connection, but I don't think it's necessarily a connection. No.
Okay.
But I can't say if that's a consistent effect by that cause. I don't know. Immorality is basically has a lot to do with time and place. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, I don't know. I know from my own observation, it would take a lot of interest sometimes to get really pissed off. I just don't have that interest. You know what I mean? It takes a lot of fuel to really harbor a resentment for a long period of time. I don't have that. The selfing doesn't have that fuel supply anymore. It can't run its big projects out of Paul.
Absolutely.
So basically it isn't really like a moral imperative. I've just lost interest. I'm just, fuck, be right, I don't care. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Got it.
So, but
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know about it. Again,
got it.
I always like to tell the story about the saint and, a person, a woman, man, it doesn't matter, but someone who's, just seems like he's doing whatever. The light's there and it's obvious and it's transmitting. And so people see him act all these crazy ways and they think just from the selfing that, all right, if I do what he does, that should lead me to where he is or she is. But he didn't arrive there by those behaviors. He's expressing something, or he's being used to express something by those behaviors. Yeah. They're not like the pavers that lead you to where he is, because he wasn't led there. Yeah. It was always available at all times. Yes. So you got to be tricky, because some non-duality teachers, in a way, are probably going to go have dementia down the road. Yeah. They're gonna, as a Paul be a not Paul, you know, and it can confuse a lot of people who pin the message on that person because the person will be out to lunch. Yeah, as a person, you gotta realize this, there is no one who's enlightened. There's enlightening maybe expressing through a one, but you can't pin the electric company on the bulb. Yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah. As supposedly Buddha said near the end, he says, hey, be a light unto yourself. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I find a lot of, it's common, Paul's, it's not that it's open source. There's no, Paul doesn't have this message. The message took what was presented as Paul and sort of changed it a little. But there was no point Paul ever had this. Yeah. So
Excellent.
it allows me to show up at 9:05 because, if it was Paul giving the talk, I would have had to get up an hour earlier and prepare myself to sort of meet the qualifications Paul would have to be a teacher of this message. But I don't get prepared or get ready. It's just whatever. Yeah. That's what I love about it. You're it. Yeah, that's what I love. You're it. It takes the time and all the fucking shit out of it. Yeah. Yeah. You're it no matter how you appear. You can't get out of it by thinking you can. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Paul. So the next question is from John Maxwell on YouTube. Is it ever frustrating for you having to use dualistic language to talk about something it is inherently unsuited for?
Yeah, of course. But I like, it's almost like it's the perfect challenge. And I see this as verbal jazz, really. So there's an uncatchable theme, let's say A Love Supreme by Coltrane. And then you're just trying to trigger that theme by notes played out of a lousy trumpet, so to speak. Yeah. I mean, the notes, the music in us is so exquisite, you can contact it with a lousy trumpet. Yeah. That's what's so beautiful about it. No, so of course, I remember when I was first got involved with this, people would be proposing to write a new language and shit. I said, well, go right ahead. It just seems like a lot of work, So, yeah, I hope what someone says doesn't override what they're saying. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah, I'm hoping what they're saying is getting through the impediments of the language they use by what they're saying. Yeah. Yeah. I feel it does, or people wouldn't show up, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Some call that resonance. Does that word?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Resonance, whatever. Yeah. I mean, how can we not be in resonance? I mean, there's obviously a huge field that doesn't run into any things. Yeah. Things are just an appearance in the field. How could a thing stop a frequency from resonating? Yeah. If there is no thing. So there's resonance to, let's say, Germany and from Northern California. Hallelujah. What does that imply? Yeah.
Yeah.
What's most important about the message is what's never said. It's what gets through. Yeah. The words are just a vehicle, a lousy one. They're not the message. The message is already there. We're trying to negate another message that by a lot of interest and attention is seemingly, it appears that it can cover up the message. So we're attempting to question a previous message that we're living from, the message that When there's seeing, there's a seer. When there's feeling, there's a feeler. When there's doing, there's a doer. Yes? That's what we're questioning.
Yeah.
I don't see why people would waste time trying to describe the indescribable when really you can describe the describable to the indescribable. Yeah. Yeah. So the indescribable, here's a description of what it's not, and it recognizes, hey, I'm not that. I'm indescribable. Instead of trying to I just see there's a drive. We start from what we're not, and we want to get what we are. Instead of hearing the message from what we are about what we're not, we keep going to places to hear the message as what we're not about what we are. It's crazy. It doesn't work to me. Yeah. That's what motivated me to talk. I went to satsangs and I saw something going on there. I couldn't put my finger on it. And then by reading something in some teachings of Ramana, the finger was brought to it. And I said, aha. And then I was motivated to start sharing stuff. And it's never changed. I mean, what's new in non-duality 2021? Nothing. It's just a basic negation of an assumed fact. It's not a fact. There's an assumption of fact of something that's not factual. I think that needs to be cleared up. So when you hear about what you're not, it may hit you as what you are. And that's the resonance. And now maybe instead of all day looking from what you're not, you'll start seeing, you'll start seeing the activity that's implying you. Yeah. Yet you'll already be something watching a product trying to sell you another something. Yeah. You'll be nothing really. Yes. So you'll see a manufactured you from what you are. Yeah. And from at that point, you can deny the fucking delivery. You can negate the delivery. You can say, I'm not interested in that delivery anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just look at the head. Watch it for a few minutes. See if this isn't true. Something happens. Something arises, claims that happening. Let's say seeing right now. So there's seeing. There seems to be no volition. There's no thought or effort in seeing. Did you have to go to a seeing class this morning? There's just seeing. Yeah. All right. So there. And then something comes up and claims the seeing. It's not a thing. It's just an activity. Claims the seeing and says the seeing is evidence there's a seer. That's all. So what's happening is used to prove that there's something that's not happening is happening. Yeah. So what's happening is used as evidence of something that's not happening. Yeah. So now the seeing gets claimed, and now you're the seer. And now you, as Paul, is blind to the seeing. Yeah. It's insanity. And now Paul uses seeing in time, which is looking, and it starts looking for seeing. Yeah. And so a master like Hoang Po comes over and says, listen, bro, you can't use the Buddha to look for the Buddha. You can't use mind to seek mind. You can't use light to seek light. You can't use seeing to look for seeing. Yeah. That's a shoe. If it doesn't fit, go to, athlete's foot, spiritual athlete's foot, whatever. Yeah. If it fits, it'll pause the activity of selfing and maybe you'll start seeing something. Yeah. And in that seeing, you'll lose interest in all that baloney that's going on. You won't have to make a heroic effort to get into a moment you can't be out of. You'll just be here, completely clear that you've never not been here. Yeah. it wasn't produced. You didn't arrive at that conclusion. It's always been there. Yeah. All the insane things we believe never made anything so. It just made it seem to be so. It appeared to us it was so, but it never becomes so. Never, ever. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent.
To me, that's a huge relief.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Paul, so we have some
Like
more-
the huge, like the Course in Miracles, if you never heard of it. All right, more questions.
Yeah. But John also says that he hopes to
The
see.
question is more important than the answer. The question is more important than the answer. Bring the questions.
Yeah, they're just
Stop
queuing up
answering.
here.
Bring a question.
Yeah. Well, John wants to say that he hopes to see you in Toronto again someday. So, and
Oh, great. Yes, I hope so.
yeah.
I hope so. Yeah.
And Yasmin, more of a comment than a question. She says, I love when you talk about the futility of trying to be here now, as if one could ever be out of the moment.
That's a lovely name. I don't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I didn't hear the question.
Oh, well, Yasmin asked, I love when you talk about the futility of trying to be here now, as if one could ever be out of the moment.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. Those are the things that, see, the only things when clarity becomes clear is because there was an assumed unclear thing. Yes? It doesn't suddenly become clear. There's always clarity. It's because something was sort of dispelled. There was an unclarity that was seen through. Yes? But there's no absence of clarity. It's always there. There can be a sense of it being covered up. Exactly. Yeah. So it seems like, oh, clarity was revealed. Yeah, but it was always here at all times. Yeah. What's revealed is there's nothing that can actually cover up clarity. That's what gets revealed. The clarity is obvious. What gets revealed is these impossibilities that we've been entertaining are truly impossible. Yeah. And then now the obvious is obvious. Now, like they say in Zen, blue is seen as blue and red is seen as red. It's obvious now. Shit that used to be very confusing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when it's obvious now that it's very clear, it informs you it's always been this way. Even when it didn't seem to be this way, it's always this way. Yeah. There are certain elements here that are not produced by effects and causes. Yes. They're always available. They can seem to be covered up, but they can only reach the appearance of something. They never can be anything because there's only that being. Yes. So that starts becoming clear to you. So when something happens and pulls your attention, you don't believe you've left the fucking honeypot of nirvana. Yes. You just see a movements, but none of them move you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, we believe we go hither and thither, this or that, this and that. We're not moving at all. We're not of a thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you, Paul. So the page number 1 from YouTube asks, is the me essentially hiding as the one that's seeing? Can this tendency drop away completely? If so,
It's not a tendency, you'll see it. So usually, let's say you become aware of certain mental activities, yes? And when that happens, that awareness of certain mental activities gets claimed by a mental activity. So now it's you looking at you. Yeah. And the one you now starts critiquing the other you, and the one you now starts looking for exotic or radical ways of getting out of the previous you, not realizing this whole thing is of two-ness, yes? So the selfing hatches like a Siamese twin, or you can look at it as the policeman and the thief, yeah? So when there's an observing of what you're not, there'll be a claiming of that observing of what you're not by what you're not. And a lot of people don't catch the second one, yeah? They don't. So they start thinking, they now are looking at self from another self vantage point, yeah? And it's just self trying to get out of self. It's just bondage of self continuum. Yeah, like when they call, let's say, awareness, which isn't doing anything, you will call it like the witnessing, yes? There's the witnessing, then there's a claiming of the witnessing, and now you have the mental product of claiming the witnessing, the witness. So now you're the witness. No, you're fucking not. It was just witnessing. There's no witness. There's no divine witness. There's no thing. Yeah? So you watch it. So selfing arises, claims, oh, that was the bad self. Yes? And now starts pontificating, making spiritual plans to escape self. All the while, the act of identification has migrated from the one to this other spiritual self. And now there you go, trying to get out of self as a self. But see, the one self that's doing all the getting out of self is called Paul, but it's selfing. Yes? Yes? You see it? Selfing can't get out of selfing, but Paul sure believes it can get out of selfing. But when you take Paul into the x-ray room and you show him the x-ray, self can't get out of self. It sees it, but goes, I beg to differ, because Paul's trying to get out of self. Well, Paul will keep trying to get out of self, and after blaming Paul forever and fucking whipping him into more effort, he'll finally realize he can't get out of self, and he'll see Paul as something other than what he is. Yes, it was an activity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you may not look like you're getting out of anything all day. Really. I swear, Paul, since I've been 6 years old, has been trying to get out of Paul. He's been trying to get out of this place. I don't know why. It took a disliking to this place. And I just wanted to get out. I read books, science fiction when I was a kid, Edgar Allan Poe. I'd ride my bike by myself. I was just trying to get out. Then I found, going in the ocean, I'd lose myself, but it would be the self that would show up. Did anyone see me catch that big wave? It was constantly, I couldn't fucking kill the thing. And then I used drugs. I figured I'd shoot a big shot of cocaine. It would fucking just erase self, at least for a few seconds. And I was willing to die with the hopes that just before I died, I'd be free from self. I overdosed purposely many times on heavy narcotics, many times on purpose. Yeah. Then spirituality, same drive. Self trying to get out of self, blaming everything. If I only would have kissed the guru's foot longer, or I should have did the 3-month retreat instead of the 3-week retreat. More. It was all slavery. It's fucking slavery to this fucking idea so much want to get out of, but you want to be there to enjoy it. You've recognized one aspect and maybe you're missing the second aspect. Well, here I am. I'm attempting to share it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
It's beautiful, Paul. Okay, so Glenn J has a question, sort of a follow-up to when you said you're never not here, seeing that. So she says, being present or never not here, is this the truth? Or is being present part of the dreaming?
I don't care. Just feel it. Don't get sucked up into the head. Yeah. It's just pointless there, because you'll be like in those hallway of mirrors. You'll be one mirror looking at another mirror for infinity. Yeah. If you feel something that produces an ease and comfort, rest. Yes. Fuck it. Yeah. So the head will want to claim it and dissect it and go. It wants to continue the investigation. It never wants to end up at a conclusion, because the conclusion is not of its favor. It wants to be relevant, and it doesn't have relevance. Yeah. So I just sense something, and I don't, dissect the P and the R and the E and the S and I just there. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
very good. Mark,
the head will try to claim it. I'm just telling you, the head will try to claim it. The head saying it's claimed it doesn't mean it's so. You can see the activity from outside the activity. You're before selfing. Yeah. You're before the mental process that's implying a product. You're before it. You're not of time. You do not start anywhere, nor do you stop. You're not fooled by the magic trick of time. You can see what you're not. You can see the activity that's implying a subject, and then telling a story that it's the object that you can see. Yeah, this is what non-duality negates. It's negating that.
Yeah.
Not to. Yeah. Yeah.
Very good. So I think we have 9 minutes left before your
I
next.
gotta end soon because I gotta do another one at 10:30. I gotta get something to drink or something.
Oh, all right.
See if these people.
Do you have time for
I'll do
one or two
short
more?
one.
Okay. Well,
No,
Mark
one.
Smith, Mark Smith just made the comment. It's not a question, but he said everything that appears is it, not just the virtuous.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yes, for sure. Yeah. It's not. There's no discrimination with it. That comes from somewhere else. Yeah. But I have to go really shortly. One more then, because I got 8 minutes.
All right. Well, I know Alongo had another follow-up question. Alongo, if you want to ask one more.
Tell him he can come to the ones we do on Wednesday or Saturday and ask.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, Alongo, you could come to those to ask another question. So one more comment. No more questions, really. Naomi Ray says, you always speak with such integrity. You can tell that Paul really cares. His service seating assignment speaks to her beyond words. Oh,
great. Well, one thing that's very healthy for the action figure to be of use. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
the hose just doesn't feel like a hose unless water's coming through it. Yeah. Yeah. I'm very happy to get together. I'm very happy to get together with people and explore ideas. Because of in this experience, I could not believe how much exquisite suffering could be weaved by the mental activity. I had no idea. And yet I have tons of empathy now for people because I can't judge what their volume is in that K-selfing. I don't know how hard they're listening to that station. And, there is a solution. Thank God you're not it and you're always it, in a weird way. Yes? So, hey, thank you. Thanks you so much for this opportunity. Again, I apologize for being late, but I'll have to apologize at the next meeting unless I get going now.
Very good. Thank you, Paul.
And then thing, what? Hey, Art, you did a great job, Art. Hey, thanks, everybody. I usually like to say goodbye, so I'll try to say goodbye quickly. Roman, always a pleasure. I'll see you soon. Art, Verena, not from the Netherlands, but from Germany. Yes, I'm clear. We got Melody. Nice to see you. We got Max. Nice to see you. Johannes, always. Tariq from Dover. Nice to see you. And anyone else? I don't see anyone. I just see names. Thank you so much. Pleasure. I'll see you. And I will be on time next month. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks. See you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Guys.